Hello everyone, it is Peter Sam the Narrow Gauge Engine here, and today we'll be looking at every Season 7 episode and ranking them worst to best. Season 7's like shit compared to the rest of them. However, I think there are a couple of really strong episodes, so it's worth it. Let's just jump in at number 26. And in number 26 is Percy Gets It Right. The episode got it wrong though. Everyone is just so unlikable in this episode. Thomas is a dick. Topham Hatt's a dick. So how is he a dick in this episode? The crash is okay, and so is the set. I mean, it's not the best we've seen this season. I just find it weak, and that's also because the Topham Hatt's like, oh, we'll trust you more at the end. But no, we know that's bullshit. We know he's just gaslighting. But let's move on to number 25. Next up in number 25 is Bad Day at Castle Lock. Nothing happens in this episode. I think they've run out of ideas for Donald and Douglas. They go and deliver supplies to a castle, get stuck on the way, and think they see the Loch Ness Monster. That lasts for about 5 seconds before they realise it's just Harvey. So what was the point of even showing that? Just, reveal that it's Harvey and it's not even like a scary monster. It's just a bit boring, if I'm honest, so let's move on to number 24. Next up in number 24 is What's the Matter with Henry? Welcome back to the Thomas and Percy being dicks show. It's happening a lot in season 7. I swear down, Emily's this episode's only saving grace. She is so nice in this episode. But even then, she doesn't mention Henry's problem until like later on. It's like you could have said right then, but no, okay. This is also the episode that starts off Henry's just being ill. Why? I've never been so confused with a character decision before, but this is just stupid. Let's just move to number 23 before my head hurts. Next up in number 23 is Harold and the Flying Horse. This is just very dull. I mean, the first minute is just dedicated to Harold flying around. Great. But there is one redeeming factor to this episode, and it's Percy's scenes. I find Percy quite amusing in this episode. But apart from that, I mean, great. It's just Harold picking up a horse. Let's move on to number 22. In number 22 is Emily's new coaches. I like Emily in the season. She's pretty caring and considerate. And I love how close it is when she saves Oliver. It's a very close call. But Thomas is a brat. Many engines have taken Annie and Clarabelle over the years, so what is the problem? Let's go on to number 21. I think I'm starting to get a bit angry. Next up in number 21 is 3 Cheers for Thomas. This episode is Thomas and Bertie, but with more of a twist. When Thomas realises that the medals have been left behind, he completely disregards the race and he goes and helps out. He does the right thing. A rarity in season 7 because I swear he's the most annoying thing. But yeah, a pretty moderate episode. Let's move on to number 20. Next up in number 20 is Edward's brass band. Edward's personality is a bit iffy in this episode. I don't think he'd react like that to not being able to pull the brass band. But I do like Bertie's scenes, especially in the mud, and it means that Edward gets to pull the brass band after all. Yeah, not much to say about this one. It's just a bit meh for me. So let's move to number 19. Next up in number 19 is Not So Hasty Puddings. I love that they brought Elizabeth back and they sort of resolved the feud of Elizabeth and Thomas. I also like the concept. I think everything in this episode is so new and creative and not really done before. But, I mean, the execution side of this episode is, really bad. The best part of it is really when Elizabeth skids on the ice and goes into a snowdrift, but we've seen snowdrift so many times before. But let's move on to number 18. In number 18 is Something Fishy. The crash is probably one of the most iconic in Thomas. I mean, that pier crash is synonymous, right? But I just found the concept a bit boring. I mean, I like how they brought Arthur back. I just think it could have had a bit more spice. Also, I think the ending's quite lazy. But yeah, the episode's pretty alright. Let's move on to number 17. Next up in number 17 is the Refreshment Lady's Tea Shop. This episode feels pretty similar to Thomas, Percy and Old Slow Coach, and it kind of works against it in that sense. But I have to admit, when the coach is restored, it looks cool. And, bringing back the Refreshment Lady is a nice idea. Although that Cockney accent just kills me every time. Michael Angelus, what have you done? But yeah, let's move on to number 16. Now, number 16 is The Altar Bridge. Alright, I get it. People don't like this episode because Scarlo acts like a child. But I mean, he dangled off the edge of a bridge. Like, I'd be scarred for life, scared of bridges forever, would never trust myself on a bridge. If I dangled off one and nearly died, that's what happened to Skarloey. He has some major PTSD, and I think everyone's missing that. Although I do agree that it's annoying, and yeah, this episode's just moderate at best anyway. So let's move on to number 15. Next up in number 15 is Peace and Quiet. I feel like Murdoch got the best introduction in season 7. He's so cool and his character's amazing as well. What a unique character. However, surely the sheeps would make Murdoch more irritated and more angry when Salty and Harvey would talk. Like, isn't that surely what would happen? However, I like this episode anyway. It's just that the next 14, I think, beat it out. So let's move on to number 14. In number 14 is Bill, Ben, and Fergus. Fergus is alright. I think his character's kind of annoying in this episode, but I can sort of understand where he's coming from. But what makes this episode for me is the landslide. Oh my god, it's so cool. I think that's the best landslide scene that we've ever seen in Thomas, I think. It just sticks in my head so much. You can see Fergus's head poke out of the pile, and it's just so weird, and I love it. But yeah, now that I've finished fanboying over landslides, let's move on to number 13. And in number 13 is Snow Engine. This episode's really funny. It's a really funny episode. Everything from Oliver crashing into the snowman and then him not wanting to leave when help arrives. It's just great. And I love how Oliver starts off hating snow and then loving it at the end, and then Toad ends up hating it at the end. It's just such a good flip. I have no complaints about this one. It's just I think the next ones are just better. So let's move on to number 12. In number 12 is Salty's Stormy Tale. The set and the atmosphere are so reminiscent of season 5, and it's great, especially with the ship and that. However, once again, Thomas and Percy are arseholes. I also like how Fergus is being used very well in this season. He has a lot of good episodes. However, he's not good enough to reach the top 10, but let's move on to number 11. And in number 11 is the Best Dressed Engine. It's a fairly simple concept in this episode, yeah, it's so effective. I love Gordon's crash into the apple cart, that's great. And I also like how Gordon wins the competition, despite not wanting to be a part of it in the first place. This episode is a wild ride, and it just missed out on the top 10. So just before we make it to our top 10, can I ask you guys to like, subscribe, do all that nice stuff. It's so you can keep up to date with my videos and the new series that will be coming, so yeah. But let's move on to number 10. So in number 10 is The Grand Opening, another episode featuring the antics of Sir Topham Hatt and Lady Hat, and I love it. Lady Hat's complaining is funny as hell, and it gets even better when the balloon crashes. Although a minute is kind of dedicated to a balloon flying around, but I like the balloon. It's very pretty and not ugly like Harold, so you know, there's that preference there. But let's move on to number 9. And in number 9 is The Spotless Record. Arthur's character is great. It's very unique, much like Murdoch's. And the runaway and the crash is great as well. However, Thomas is annoying. Again, why is he so, interfering in this season? However, I don't think that makes the episode too bad. But let's move on to number 8. And in number 8 is Bulgy Rides Again. I love how they brought back Bulgy. He's so much better in this episode, I think. I also love how the hens cause his downfall as a bus, as well as his new sleek design. I think he's much more pretty than before, and the ending is probably one of the best in the series, where it becomes a vegetable stand. Oh my god, it's amazing. Just a pretty good episode. I find the next 7 beat it out, but let's move on to number 7. And in number 7 is The Runaway Elephant. I think the runaway scene is what makes this episode. I love it. It's great. It may be unrealistic, but you know, so was Thomas the Jet Engine, and no one had any problem with that. And the elephant splashing into the lake in slow-mo, oh, beautiful. Oh, and the cherry on the cake is when Skarloey and Rusty say this.
Hooray for Duncan's mistake, cheered the engines.
So next up in number 6 is Fergus Breaks the Rules. The return of Diesel is nigh, and I love it. His scheme is great, although I don't get how Fergus buys that, because that is so ridiculous. But the scene where Fergus runs away, the set is so beautifully designed, oh my god. And the cherry on top is that Thomas is actually nice, oh my god. Yeah, but let's move on to our top 5. Next up in 5th place is Trusty Rusty. This is another one of those episodes where, you know, Duncan's wrong and Rusty's right. But I mean, there's a giant bridge that collapses. I mean, that's cool as hell. And the scene where Rusty is trying to rescue Duncan, it's so tense and climactic. It's just a great episode for that scene. It's so beautiful. But let's move on to number 4. Next up in number 4 is James and the Queen of Sodor. The Queen of Sodor is a barge, and obviously James mistakes it for an actual queen. And plus this episode is all about James trying to stay clean, and obviously the barge is like a rusty old dirty one, and the barge is covered in sludge, you know, when the ship hits a pipe. And it's just, you know, James trying to stay clean. And he succeeds until, like, the last few seconds of the episode. When you think James is actually going to stay clean, Percy comes along and just, like, blows soot and everything all over him. It subverts your expectations in that sense, and I love it for that reason. But anyway, let's move on to 3rd place. And in our 3rd spot is Rheneas and the roller coaster. This episode is a wild ride, and it's so fun and creative and just fast-paced, and it's amazing. The camera angles make, like, these flat layers of track look like a roller coaster, and it's great. You know what I mean when you see it. Rheneas looks like he's climbing a mountain when in fact he's just on a straight piece of track that's not going up or down or anything. However, I do have one minor problem, and it's Rheneas's impatience. But then again, it causes the fast-paced, like, roller coaster sequence, so I'll shut my mouth. Also, props to that teacher for not throwing up. But let's move on to our 2nd spot. And in our number 2 spot is Gordon and Spencer. I love Spencer. He's got a cool, sleek design and a nice silver colour. But what makes this episode for me is the symbolism and, like, the full circle that Gordon's come. Let's compare this episode to Edward and Gordon. Do you see anything similar? You know, an engine gets stuck on a hill and the more responsible one has to come and help. It's as if Gordon has become more grown up here, and I love it. I love it for that. But there's just one more episode that beats it out. So let's move on to number 1. And in my top spot is Toby's Windmill. The set design after the storm in this episode is just mwah. Oh my god. I think Toby's crash is alright at the beginning as well. That's great. And his concern for the miller is so heartwarming. It's so adorable. And let's move on to our best bit of the episode, the storm. Oh my god. Oh my god. Take a shot every time I've said oh my god, because I've said it a lot. Honestly, if the writing wasn't as bad as it was, I would have said put this episode in season 5. But then again, it's season 7, so it's a pile of shit regardless. And that's it. The last season I'm gonna rank complete. Actually feels like kind of a relief, because then I don't have to explain my reasons to like episodes. But I am gonna do a final wrap-up video for this series, and it's coming soon, pretty soon actually, ranking every season from worst to best. It will include Jack in the Pack and the 7 seasons we've discussed. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.